अस्सलाम वालेकुम स्टूडेंट्स, वेलकम टू माय चैनल। आज हम GSCA 201 के लेक्चर वाइज MCQs कवर करेंगे और ये MCQs मिड टर्म प्रिपरेशन के लिए आपके बनाए गए हैं। ठीक है, तो चलिए स्टार्ट करते हैं लेक्चर 1 के साथ। व्हाट इज द मेन फोकस ऑफ पेडागोजिकल कंटेंट नॉलेज? अंडरस्टैंडिंग द कंटेंट, हाउ स्टूडेंट्स लर्न इट एंड appropriate teaching methods. Which of the following is true about science? Science is an organized body of knowledge about the natural world and its processes. What is scientific theory? An explanation of observed phenomena that is widely tested and accepted. What is the primary aim of science? To establish explanation for natural phenomena supported by evidence. Which of the following is not part of scientific practices? Guessing without evidence. What is considered as data or evidence in science? Observations or measurements made in natural or controlled environments. Why is argumentation and logical reasoning important in science? To connect data or evidence with theories and evaluate explanations. What should scientists do when new evidence conflicts with an established theory? They modify or revise the theory according to the new evidence. Which of the following is essential to avoid bias in scientific research? Multiple investigators working on the same study. Why is teaching science important for all students? To develop scientific literacy and critical thinking applicable across disciplines. Which arguments support a public understanding of science for society? Economic, utilitarian, democratic, cultural, and moral arguments. What is the goal of K-8 science education? To develop a strong base of knowledge and scientific practices for higher grades and other subjects. Which of the following is true about science as a social activity? Scientific knowledge is developed collectively and must survive institutional checking. Which skill is promoted by teaching science to children? Evidence based reasoning, critical thinking, problem solving, and social interaction. What should students understand about scientific explanation? There may be several explanations for the same phenomena valued by evidence. Scientific knowledge is acquired through which of the following? Observation, questioning, hypothesizing, predicting, investigating, analyzing, and communicating. Which of the following is not a scientific process skill? Guessing randomly. What is the correct definition of observing in scientific practice? Watching carefully without actively participating and taking notice of details. What does predicting mean in scientific inquiry? Making a statement about how things will happen in the future based on knowledge or experience. In the candle experiment, which skills were primarily used? Observing, predicting, and communicating. What is the hypothesis in simple word? A proposed explanation for phenomena. In the Velcro experiment, which new process skill was introduced? Hypothesizing. Which skill involves explaining, reframing, or showing your understanding of something? Interpreting. Why is communication important in scientific experiments? To share findings clearly and exchange ideas with others. Which of the following is an example of analyzing data in a science experiment using the coin reflection formula to calculate number of images? Which process skill involves generating questions about observed phenomena? Questioning. In the Hink mirror experiment, what was the purpose of interpreting the data? To explain and understand the relationship between angle and number of reflection. Which combination of the skills is essential for scientific inquiry? Observing, hypothesizing, predicting, investigating, interpreting, and communicating. Why is predicting used before conducting an experiment? To make a forecast about the expected outcomes based on prior knowledge. What is the purpose of identifying process skills in experiment to recognize the specific scientific abilities applied during inquiry? Which of the following is an example of the process skill observing, using senses and tools to identify similarities and differences between objects? What does the process skill questioning involve? Raising investigable questions and suggesting ways to find answers. A hypothesis can be defined as a proposed explanation for a phenomena based on evidence or prior experiences. अच्छा आंसर्स इसी तरह से बनाए हैं कि ये आपके ना शॉर्ट आंसर में भी इस्तेमाल होंगे. ठीक है, अगर आप शॉर्ट आंसर के लिए प्रिपरेशन करेंगे तो उसके लिए भी आपके लिए बहुत बेनिफिशियल रहेंगे और एमसीक्यूज के लिए भी आपके कॉन्सेप्ट जो है वो यहाँ से इंशाल्लाह ताला क्लियर हो जाएंगे. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट है व्हिच स्टेटमेंट बेस्ट डिस्क्राइबिंग प्रेडिक्टिंग forecasting the outcome of a future event based on evidence or a hypothesis. In planning and investigating, what is the main focus? Identifying variables to change, controlling constants, and deciding what to measure. Which of the following is an example of interpreting data, identifying patterns in observation, and drawing conclusion? What does communicating in scientific inquiry involve? Presenting finding using writing, drawing, models, tables, or graphs. Sub-skills of observing include collecting evidence, classifying, measuring, identifying similarities and differences. Which skill is used when students make a forecast about the number of reflection in the hanged mirror experiment? It's predicting. Why are process skills often practiced simultaneously in real experiment? Observing, predicting, hypothesizing, and interpreting often happen together. Which of the following best describes planning in scientific inquiry? Designing an investigation include steps to test a hypothesis and collect reliable data. How do process skills help students in science? They build conceptual understanding and improve practical investigation abilities. Which skill involves discussing finding and connecting them to initial question? Interpreting. Why is it important to teach process skills separately to students? To identify which skills a student need to strengthen. Which of the following is not a sub-skill of communicating? It's ignoring data and observation. What is meant by pedagogical content knowledge? Combination of subject knowledge and teaching methods. Pedagogical content knowledge mainly focuses on understanding how students learn a subject. An effective teacher should understand what is easy and difficult for a student. What role does prior knowledge play in learning? Students connect new information with existing knowledge. The main goal of learning is to fit new information into existing mental structure. Children develop many scientific ideas before coming to school through daily life experiences. Which of the following prior idea helps learning? It's classification of animals. What is meant by conceptual change? Changing and refining prior ideas over time. Which type of concepts are easier for children to understand? Concepts that match their daily life experiences. Why are balanced forces difficult for children to understand? They require changing existing ideas. Before starting a science lesson, a teacher should first check students' prior knowledge. Science teaching should mainly focus on understanding how the world works. In inquiry-based teaching, the role of the teacher is mainly to act as a facilitator or guide. How should textbooks be used in science teaching along with inquiry and activities? Guided inquiry means that teacher provides clues and scaffolding. In the traditional teaching approach, content is taught first, then activities. In inquiry-based classrooms, students actively participate in activities. The main focus of inquiry-based teaching is on learning process and concept building. Which skills should teacher develop while teaching science? Observation skills. Helping children ask testable question is important because it supports scientific thinking. An object is usually made of different types of material. Which of the following is basic property of an object? Its color. Materials can undergo which type of change in this lesson? Physical change. Why is children pure knowledge assessed in science lesson? To understand what children already know. Which property helps in identifying objects by touch? Its texture. Which of the following is a correct example of physical change? Dissolving jelly in water. In grade 2 science, learning goals focus mainly on developing scientific skills. Which skill is developed when student group should which skill is developed when students group objects based on similarities? Its classification. What is the purpose of using inquiry based learning in this lesson? To engage students in active learning. In sequence of learning, which phase focuses on assessing prior knowledge is phase A. What was the main purpose of the making jelly activity? Is to observe changes in materials. Jelly crystals are an example of solid matters. Which sense was mainly used to observe jelly crystal? Its sight. What scientific skill is developed when students carefully look at jelly? Its observation. Why was magnifying glass used in this lesson? To observe small particles clearly. Which property of gel crystals was identified by touch, texture? Before starting the activity, students were asked about their ideas of jelly to assess prior knowledge. Recording observation helps a student to develop scientific thinking. Jelly powder is made up of tiny particles. Which learning approach is used in the jelly activity? Is inquiry based learning. What was the main focus of lesson 8? Its weight of object. Weight is best described as how heavy or light an object is. Which sense helps a student compare weight directly? Touch. Lifting object. When a student lift two objects to compare them, they are using observation skills. Which object is likely to be heavier? A stone. Why were students asked to predict before checking weight to develop thinking skill? Comparing objects by weight helps a student understand that objects can be heavy or light. Which tool can be used for more accurate weight comparison? It's balance scale. Group discussion during the activity helps a student to share ideas and reasoning. Exploring weight through hands-on activities supports inquiry-based learning. What is meant by the volume of an object? How much space the object occupies. Which activity best helps a student understand volume? Filling containers with water. Volume can be compared by pouring liquids into containers. Which material is commonly used to explore volume in glass? It's sand or water. When two or more when two containers hold different amounts of water, students learn that volume can be more or less. Why are transparent containers preferred for volume activities? They allow students to see the liquid level clearly. Pouring water from one container to another helps students understand volume remains the same. Which skill is mainly developed during volume experiment, observation, and comparison? When students predict which container holds more water, they are practicing scientific thinking. Exploring volume through hands-on activities supports inquiry-based learning. Which property is true for solids? They have a fixed shape. Liquids take the shape of the container. Which property is true for gases? Gases take the shape of their container. Solids are mostly hard and keep their shapes. Which activity helps students understand liquids? Pouring water from one cup to another. What is the one way students learn about gases? Inflating and deflating a balloon. Which sense is not primarily used to identify gas, smell? Why do teachers use charts for solids, liquids, and gases to help students classify and compare? Which statement is correct? Solids cannot change shape easily. Hands on activities on solids, liquids, and gases help the student develop observation skills and scientific thinking. Which of the following is a common property of all liquids? They flow and take the shape of the container. Liquids can be classified based on their ability to flow, thickness, and transparency. What is the secret property activity in liquids? Identifying liquids without looking. Transparent liquids are liquids through which objects are clearly seen. Which liquids allow light to pass but images appear blurry? It's translucent. Which skill do students develop while classifying liquids? Observation, comparison, and interpretation. In group work, students learn to share materials, interact, and discuss ideas. Which statement is true about liquids? Liquids can be thick or thin. Complex classification of liquid involves classifying into two or three groups based on multiple properties. What is the main learning outcome of this lesson? Students understand properties of liquids, classify them, and develop scientific thinking. What is the main purpose of assessment? To collect information about the student's learning and improve future learning. Which of the following is a characteristic of assessment? Assessment can occur before, during, and after teaching. Which of the following is not necessary for assessment? It's observation. Summative assessment is conducted at the end of the learning to evaluate achievement. Formative assessment aims to monitor progress and improve learning continuously. Which of the following is an example of formative assessment? It's observation during classroom activities. Which of the following indicates good assessment practice? Providing constructive feedback. In inquiry based teaching, assessment occurs at multiple stages like observing, questioning, and sharing findings. What is the purpose of indicators for assessing processor skills? It is to check whether student can observe, communicate, and classify. Which of the following statement is correct? Assessment is a continuous process to improve learning. What is the main purpose of this lesson? It is to develop observation skill and enhance the students' senses. Which senses are primarily used in observing jelly crystal? Sight, touch, smell, and taste. How does magnifying glass help the student makes objects larger to see details clearly? Which properties of jelly were observed by student? Its color, shape, texture, smell, and taste. What role did group discussion play in this lesson? Students shared observation and learned from each other. How did students record their observation on worksheets or observation tables? What did students learn about jelly particles? Jelly is made up of tiny particles. How did students interact with different jelly flavors? Each pair received different flavors to observe and taste. What was emphasized during observation? Using all senses and not arguing over flavor or color. Why is this lesson important for students? Develop observation skill, teamwork, and scientific thinking. When is summative assessment conducted? After completing the lesson. What is the main purpose of summative assessment? To check a student's achievement and mastery of concepts and skills. How does formative assessment differ from summative assessment? Formative assessment is continuous during learning. Which of the following is not recommended? Do while evaluating student work, acknowledge effort and encourage students. What should teacher avoid in feedback, judgmental comments, and scores while concepts are developing? What are examples of summative assessment, final exam, major test, student course evaluation? Student, what are examples of formative assessment? Homework review, class observation, student-teacher conferences. Which of the following is a key takeaway of summative assessment? Evaluating learning after lesson completion. What type of teaching aids are recommended for pre-primary summative assessment? It's natural, technical, intuitive, figurative, and printed. Why is continuous formative assessment important in inquiry-based teaching? It helps plan next learning step and give guidance. Which principle explain the working of thermometer? Liquids and gases expand when heated. Which scales are commonly used in thermometer? Celsius and Fahrenheit. What is a key skill students learn in this lesson? Measuring temperature using a liquid in glass thermometer. Why are balloons used in hot water in the demonstration? To show expansion of air or steam. How do students record their temperature measurement in worksheet or science notebook? Which of the following is part of materials used for experiments? Alcohol in glass thermometer, beaker with tap water, plastic bottle with balloon. What attitude is emphasized in this lesson? Appreciation of evidence, teamwork, and careful observation. How do students explore liquid expansion? By using glass bottle with colored water and straw in hot water. Why is observation and recording emphasized in this lesson? To develop scientific understanding through experience and evidences. What does dissolving means in science? When a solid mixes with a liquid and forms a uniform solution, it's dissolving. What factors affect the rate at which sugar dissolves in water? The size of sugar particles. In the FAIR test demonstration, what was the variable that changed form of sugar, powder or grains? Which observation was made during the dissolving experiment? Powdered sugar dissolved faster than sugar grains. What must remain constant in a FAIR test? All conditions except the variable being tested. Why is the FAIR test important in this experiment? To ensure accurate comparison of the effect of sugar particle size. Which skill is mainly developed by this experiment? Observation, comparison, and recording. Which of the following is true about sugar powder and grains in water? Sugar powder dissolves completely faster than grains. Which sense is not directly used in this dissolving activity? It's hearing. What is the main scientific concept demonstrated by this activity? The effect of particle size on dissolving rate. इसके साथ ही हमारे एमसीक्यूज की ये वीडियो भी यहीं मुकम्मल होती है। मुझे उम्मीद है कि एमसीक्यूज आपके लिए बहुत बेनिफिशियल रहेंगे। ये सिर्फ एमसीक्यूज के पर्पस से ही नहीं, आपकी शॉर्ट आंसर के पर्पस से भी बहुत ज्यादा जो है वो बेनिफिशियल रहेंगे। ठीक है, आई होप कि ये वीडियो आपके लिए बहुत काम आए और आपका पेपर बहुत अच्छा हो। ठीक है जी, चैनल सब्सक्राइब करना हरगिज ना भूलिएगा। मेरे एमसीक्यूज को और मेरे बाकी लेक्चर्स को भी अपने फेलो स्टूडेंट के साथ डिफरेंट वर्चुअल यूनिवर्सिटी के ग्रुप्स में जरूर शेयर करें, ताकि मैक्सिमम स्टूडेंट्स जो है ना वो इन लेक्चर से, इन वीडियो से भरपूर फायदा उठा सके अपने मिड टर्म प्रिपरेशन के लिए। मैं इंशाल्लाह ताला अपने नेक्स्ट लेक्चर के साथ जल्द हाजिर होंगी। तब तक आप सब अपना बहुत ख्याल रखिएगा। अल्लाह हाफ़िज़।